From the iShin Broadcast Studio, it's What's Trending, brought to you by Apex.
Hello and welcome to What's Trending with Tire Review. My name is David. I am your host, and today we are talking about the technician shortage with our guest, Andrew Coccari. He is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Sonic Tools USA. Let's get to the interview. Andrew, thank you so much for jumping on today and speaking with me about specifically the technician shortage. So just a little bit of background here. I wrote a column in Tire Review's December 2023 issue about the technician shortage. You shot me an email, said, hey, I want to talk to you a little bit more about this. I've got some perspective to add here. And so here we are. So I really appreciate your time. Can you give me just a little bit of background about Sonic Tools in perspective of the technician shortage and kind of how you feel that you're able to address that through your company?
Yeah, so Sonic Tools USA, we're a 40-year-old European tool manufacturer, but we've been only in the US and North America for 8 years. We're a professional tool company that manufactures everything that's on the website, tools, obviously highest quality tools, toolboxes, cabinets. But what we do is, when we started the company back in 2014, we really didn't want to do tool trucks. We don't want to sell directly to technicians. We recognized, actually our investment thesis was all around the lack of technicians, the lack of support in technical schools, the lack of career pathing right now for kids getting into the business. And our owners and founders wanted to actually position this company around a solution to help owners, operators, franchisees, service people to actually help them recruit and retain technicians. So our whole positioning of our company, the way we go to market, is actually helping fixed ops managers, owners, franchisees actually recruit and retain technicians. Now, you might be like, well, you're a tool company. How do you do that? And we actually, what we do is we don't sell tools to technicians. We sell tools to people who actually own the shops. And we can get into it a little bit later, but we actually encourage them to actually use tools for recruitment and retention of technicians, because we know all the issues with technicians. There's a low career pathway. It's very difficult to get into the business. These poor kids have to pay a lot of money to go to school. They go into debt to pay for school. And then they actually have to go into debt to fill their toolbox. And we don't believe that that's actually should be the case. We think actually, and we have the data to prove it, that when you provide the tools and give them a pathway to earn those tools as their own, like say you work at a shop, a tire store, you start out in the quick lube bay or the quick change bay, and then you move up. When you move up, you get your own set of tools that actually is given to you from the store owner. And then after 2 years, you own those tools. And that's called the Sonic Pathway Program. And that's how we go to market, honestly. So we're encouraging people to actually not have technicians bring their own tools. We actually encourage you to actually buy the tools and then give them to the technician. And then he earns those tools over time. And then as that technician moves up in his certification, you give him a couple more foams of tools for that toolbox, and he becomes a more adequate technician using those tools. So we actually, and we've done all the studies for productivity, efficiency, and actually it leads to a much happier, more rewarding life at the shop if you're a technician, and we have the data to prove that. It actually makes them more productive as well. The other hidden piece of this is, they're not going to push their toolbox across the street for $1 more after 6 months because they have to pay off $5,000 that's being taken out of their paycheck. So, and I'm not casting aspersions on kind of the tool industry, but that's how it kind of operates. It sells you your tools, the tool truck sells you your tools. Now you get it deducted out of your paycheck. You realize that very quickly, maybe you're not the best financial manager, right? So you all of a sudden your paycheck every 2 weeks has got $100 taken out of it. And you're like, okay, now what am I going to do?
Sure.
So basically Sonic is there to support technicians by convincing fixed ops managers, shop owners, service writers to actually give the tools to the technicians and use that pathway and that career pathway. And then you can see there's a lot of other benefits to that as well. There's productivity because they're not on the tool truck for a half hour every week. So there's a lot of opportunities there. So that's kind of how Sonic goes to market.
So break that down just a little bit more for me. So if I'm a shop owner and I buy into this program, is the idea that I buy these tools and then you provide kind of a timeline or a guideline as far as, okay, after 2 years or after this certification, you are going to hand these tools over to that technician. And then maybe there are other tools that are coming in where, okay, once they hit 3 years, 4 years, whatever it might be, they get that set of tools. Is that sort of how it works?
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Just like that. So basically, when we know that in the tire industry, it's hard to recruit technicians in a couple of ways. One is if you're lucky enough, one of my close friends owns a store. He tries to get the apprentice technicians out of the car dealers, just, pay them a little bit more, pitch it more like a family business. They're members of the community. They do a lot of things outside, but he starts them on quick service or he matches them up with a master technician. So at that point, what he does is he gives them an apprentice set, right? Have it and says, here's your pathway. Now, every shop owner that we work with, every owner operator has a different way of doing this. We encourage, we have a framework, but depending on the laws, depending on your marketplace, how you're going to compete, you have to determine what what we call the pathway is. So what happens is you get this apprentice set, you work along the technician. When you start doing more work yourself, you start, doing flat rate or whatever it is, then you get maybe 2 more. We have everything is shadow foamed, right? So it's all the tools fit right into the toolbox. You've seen it on the website. I don't want to do like a gross advertisement for our tool sets, but basically you get another 2 foams of tools that brings you up to an intermediate set that you can do a lot more repairs. Okay. Now that says, okay, in 2 more years, that whole set is yours, or a year and a half, right? That also increases pay because as you increase your, the amount of ROs you're working on by yourself, you're basically making more money. So they're paying you more money. The benefit is that you're not having to pay this high interest rate nut that you've done to get your tools into the business. You're already paying your school loans, right? So we have a lot of empathy for that. And what happens is the way you articulated that is as you earn those tools and you get those tools, you think, well, do they take the tools and leave? No, actually the retention rate is over 95% with the people in these programs. And we've done a lot of re-interviews of technicians who have left the programs. And the reason why is their wife got a job out of town. That's the number one reason. So they're not leaving because they don't like their job. And sometimes it depends on what the rates are and how they pay them, but it allows them to be sharper on the pay scale as well because they're not paying this whole debt service to their tool set. So they can basically give them increments every 6 months and give them a couple more bucks or $1 every 6 months as well. So it allows them to be actually more flexible with the pay rate because they don't have this big debt hanging over their head.
Got it. Okay. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
So obviously when we're talking about the technician shortage, this is not something that is just affecting the tire industry, right? I mean, it's just about everything in the automotive and beyond industry.
Absolutely.
Of course, though, we are on a tire podcast here. So can you speak to how you've noticed the tech shortage affecting the tire industry as opposed to maybe diesel or collision or whatever it might be?
Sure. I think, when we talk to dealers, tire dealers, they're always looking for that unicorn mechanic who wants to come work for them, who's a master tech or a medium level tech who wants to come in and he can just knock it out of the park. But that typically is not what is being recruited. As I said before, as we discussed before, they're getting basically an apprentice technician. They could be coming out of Quick Lube, right? Quick Lubes are doing more service. They're not doing tires, obviously, but they're doing more cart in the parking lot service. So there's this blending of the lines that I see in the channels. So that actually adds more competition to the tire store, right? So that makes the technician shortage more acute. Now, as you train them, what I'm seeing is is that they're getting more entry-level technicians and they need more training, right? So it's someone who does not want to work in a certain area, maybe can't travel. He lives in the community, doesn't want to travel 60 miles to get to the car dealer they used to work at. Mm-hmm. So there's a value prop of the local tire store of recruiting local technicians, right? And I think what I see in tire though is they're not getting those unicorns, the principal technician as they used to, because that person now is either retiring out, right? Because for every 10 retirements, we're getting maybe 2 or 3 coming in from the technical schools. The other thing is they're doing the smart thing is they're recruiting directly at the technical schools, which I think is really important. But because of the margins in the tire business, and you know them probably better than I do, it's harder to recruit those higher end schools because they're everyone's trying to get those, including the dealers as well as manufacturing sites. I mean, the manufacturers are going to the automotive technical schools as well. We work heavily in aviation, so we see a lot of the aviation mechanics moving around as well. They might go into manufacturing. So there's this huge blending of lines. So for the tire store, what we see is they have to get these apprentice technicians in, and really on a company-owned quick service set or an apprentice set, right? So if they don't have tools, that's actually a recruiting point. It's like, you don't need your tools. We have tools, right? Yeah. Now, if they're using something that's just a rusted, service cart, that's not really job satisfaction for someone who considers them a young professional technician. And we talk to a lot of young technicians around this because they don't want to get if they go to a car dealer, they might get I don't want to use any brand names, but the crappy service cart that's rusted. They want their own tools. So if they go to a tire store and the tire store gives them an apprentice set and say, hey, you're doing all this work. This is your box. You work on this box. You work for me 2 to 3 years, and this is yours. You got to progress. You got to pass these milestones. But what we're seeing is the progressive tire stores, when they do that, they're getting a lot more buy-in from these young technicians. And I mean, these technicians that, when it's really hard to get millennials to choose between maybe programming and computer science and coding and going to technical school. I talked to a technician the other day who does coding on his spare time. He has a background in computer science. He's a technician, but he thinks coding is working with his hands just like it is when he's turning a wrench. So it's like, it's a pretty interesting perspective. So we have to take the totality of those young technicians into account.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So obviously you've put a lot of effort into designing your tools in a certain way, designing the packaging of those tools in a certain way. Do you have any market or technical partnerships that you're involved in that has influenced the way that you've been able to market your tools?
Yeah, well, so we basically are. If you go to our website, you'll see that it's about productivity and efficiency, and all our tools, we don't have tools thrown in a toolbox or with little plastic dividers. Everything is shadow foamed. And the way the foams are created is it's based on the usage occasion of if you use something 30 or 40 times an hour, it's at the front of the foam. And it's very easy to see where it is. It's very easy to keep track of your tools, take inventory, but actually because you're not rooting around for 3 or 4 seconds in the drawers, you're more productive. And we've actually done time studies that actually shows that when you use our box, you might be 15 to 20% more productive than your tools just shoved into a drawer. I know that sounds insane, but it's true. We've done multiple time studies. So when everything's shadow foamed, everything is efficient, shadow foamed, neat, and it can be taken quick inventory. So say, for example, we work heavily with the European OEMs. So we are sanctioned by BMW, VW, obviously in the US, General Motors, Ford, all the technicians. We're in all the BMW training centers. So if you go to BMW and you take a technician's training for BMW, you're learning on our tools. So we've been adopted by a lot of the OEs because of the way of the productivity, the efficiency, the inventory, inventory control. So say you give a technician a box and you want to take inventory every week, right? Because you take it. So the service manager goes in, he can take inventory of those tools in about 30 seconds in those foams. There's an inventory control sheet on top. It's laminated. You can see it. You can see what's missing. You can either order it and warranty it. So we really build that efficiency is really adopted by most of the OEMs globally for the way we work. So that we have a lot of relationships. We also have a lot of relationships in aviation. We work with many of the schools that train mechanics. Probably 85% of the schools that train aviation mechanics in the U.S. use our tools. We do a lot of revenue there. We also support students. So we have a student program. So we sell at a significant discount. So if you have any of your young listeners are going to buy their own set, we have a student group that sells at 30% off. So you can buy, and then we do have financing. So we do sell that way, even though we want to sell to the owner. If you want to buy, we actually try to provide it almost at cost to these students.
Oh, interesting.
So we have a lot of relationships. We're even though we've been in the U.S. 8 years, our depth of relationships are quite mature.
Fantastic. I do want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier about the technician who sees working with his hands in two very different fields, but kind of feels the same way about it. That's kind of fascinating to me. So, what do you think these shop owners today need to be aware of, when they're thinking about the next generation of these technicians when it comes to a recruitment or retainment standpoint? I mean, what do they need to be thinking about differently that maybe 10, 15 years ago was not at the front of their mind?
I think when you look at the way the millennials interact with everything, they want to be on their screen. So to see their RO on an iPad and be able to hit the TSBs, they want a screen there because they're mostly natives now. They're digitally native, as versus the old school guys like me who had the manual and we were working through the paper ROs and all that. I think digitizing the shop as much as you can. I also think that millennials have a deep sense of community, and one of the advantages that the tire stores have is many of them have deep relationships with the communities. Many of them support charities. So these young technicians want to do good what they do, and they want to go to a local charity walk with their team and their family. I think the more that they can make them feel like a family in the shop versus the old school way. Now the independent repair garages are still much family-run businesses and their families, right? But I think the tire stores are looking for productivity and efficiency, and that sometimes means, being cold, right? And that might means being more numbers based. These kids are quantitative, but they're digital, but they also want to feel like they belong. So an important sense of team is really important to them, and I think that these owners and we're running a small business as well as Sonic Tools. You get kind of tunnel vision on focusing on driving revenue, but we've always got to remember that we're working with a bunch of humans, and especially these millennials. It's a high touch environment. Gone are the days of nobody talking about their home life. Everybody knows everything in these shops now, and we want to keep it positive for them and keeping it done. Now, the thing is, I think they're also looking for, like we talked about, a pathway. So they're not just looking about a job, right? They're looking for okay, you're going to learn, you're going to earn this, you're going to do this, you're going to earn more, and these pathway programs, the way you lay it out, is actually plays to millennials because they can see what they're going to be in 5 years. They can see what they can make in 5 years. And that's transparency is really important with this generation. And I think, because they're digital natives, don't not put the iPad on the set top because they want to be on the screen.
Sure. Well, Andrew, I think you make a lot of really great points here. Obviously we both know there's no just simple, here's the solution, let's just roll with it and this will be over in a couple of years. It's very complicated, but a lot of what you're talking about here, I think, makes a lot of sense as far as getting us over this hump and, getting the industry to a much better place here. So I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your perspective here. This is fantastic.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all you do about this. This is an important issue, and I'm so happy to talk to you about it. So take care.
Absolutely. Take care. Okay, so that was a great conversation. There is no silver bullet that is going to just take care of the technician shortage, but we can chip away at it, especially with different perspectives like Andrew's. So really appreciate that conversation. Thank you for joining us. Take care.